I got a question for you. Are you making a big decision right now? One of those decisions that you know, like, man, that's a big one. Maybe you're dating somebody and you're thinking, should I marry this person? Or maybe you're getting married and you're thinking, well, we got to pick a venue, right? That seems like a big decision. Are you thinking about having kids? Are you thinking about moving or taking a new job or maybe getting a new education and heading your life in a different direction? Are you thinking about something that you know is pivotal, a really important decision that's in front of you? Man, it seems like that's what we mean when we're talking about this word intersections. There are points in our lives where we cross the paths, right? Where you're driving one direction and you go through an intersection, a choice in your life where you can go, this could go a different direction, couldn't it? Really good things can happen in intersections, right? You can change direction and go the right direction. You can make a U-turn in an intersection. You can do things in an intersection that are critically important to your life. But you know what? All the bad things can happen at intersections too. Somebody else could do something that radically derails your life. You could make one critical wrong choice in an intersection and the whole story of your life changes. That's really what we're talking about during this series. We're going to evaluate these critical moments in our life. And what I'd pose to you today is that even if you didn't answer that question, yes, that you are making a big decision right now, I would just pose to you that every single one of us are making critical, pivotal decisions in our life. But it really kind of depends on how you define critical, or more importantly today, pivotal. Because when we talk about the word pivotal, we usually think that means big, right? But really, if you think about it, pivotal isn't always big, isn't it? Like a pivot is just a small step in action that changes a big change in direction. A small step in our actions that makes a big change in our direction. So let me just show it to you. If we're pivoting, right, we move from one place to another. Small action that changes a lot in direction, doesn't it? Like an entirely different direction in my life when we pivot. If you watch basketball players will use a pivot foot. And from one point of pivot, they can move their body to an entirely different direction. When I was in high school, I played basketball, and my coach was big on fundamentals, and he would always talk to us and push us to land in the triple threat position. The triple threat position as the ball in a place where I could easily shoot from that position, I could pass from that position, or I could dribble from that position. It's all about the position of our bodies. Sometimes that's our problem, right? Sometimes we want to see God's hand at work. What we really need to do is watch his feet. Because we're looking for big actions from God, but it's already been told in how he's positioning our life. And that's really the question, is are you willing to pivot your life to match what God is at work doing long before you want to see his hand at work? We'll begin to see his feet at work if we're in tune with it. Now listen, I'm going to talk to you today through a passage and just kind of talk about some of those pivotal decisions, some of those pivotal choices that you and I make. We're going to talk through a passage that's pretty obscure. It's probably not one that you've ever heard a sermon on. You probably never heard anybody talk about these people, because 2 of the 4 or so people in this name aren't even named. We don't even get their name. In fact, maybe even 3 of them. So we're going to talk through some people that seem to be obscure and nameless, because that is what a pivotal choice is about. Pivotal choices don't always announce themselves as critical. They are those moments. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. It's kind of like, how do you start your day off? And for the last month or so, I've really been trying to start every day off, like when my feet hit the carpet, when I get up, as soon as I can remember to do it, I want to say to myself, today is the day the Lord has made, and I will rejoice. I'll be happy. I'll rejoice in it. That little thing, I mean, that's not a big decision, is it? But it is pivotal. Because how I begin my day might change my direction significantly. Today's the day the Lord has made. So we're going to use insignificant people telling their insignificant story, because they made a small, seemingly insignificant step that changed direction in a big way. Look at that. It says this: in those days, a man named Manoah, that's the first name we get, and then we don't get a lot more, from the tribe of Dan, lived in the town of Zorah. His wife, we don't get her name, she was unable to become pregnant, and they had no children. Now that doesn't seem as big a deal when you read it, Now, those of you who've gone through or struggled through infertility and really wanted to have kids, you understand how big a deal that is. Like, at first, this just seems like maybe it's just information, but it's not. She was unable to become pregnant, and with that truth comes a whole lot of grief, a whole lot of pain, and a whole lot of feelings that get wrapped up in it, don't they? But here's the thing, it's even more significant for Manoah and his wife. Because in their time, it wasn't just something that they wanted to do. It wasn't just, I want to have children, I want this for my life, I want to have a family. It's not just that, it's that. Plus, in their culture, they were thought of as insignificant. Thought of as, in some ways, many ways, that God didn't like them or that they were doing something wrong. So that wasn't true, but it's how their culture would have interpreted it. They did something wrong, or they were unloved by God in some way because they weren't blessed with children. And so there was that much despair, even more on top of their story. Now here's the question for her. Like this big pivotal moment all of a sudden in her life that doesn't seem all that pivotal. She can't have children. Is she angry at God about it? Is she distant with God about it? But then we start to see that she left her life open to pivot in a direction so that she could join God at work. And when his feet moved, instead of waiting to see his hand, look at what it says next. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife and said, even though you have been unable to have children, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now, this is a pretty critical moment in her life, isn't it? I mean, all of a sudden, this angel shows up on the story, and she is at a critical place in her life where her story is dramatically going to change. But it didn't seem like it was going to be that kind of day, did it? I mean, when she woke up that morning, that afternoon, whatever was going on, it didn't seem like things were going to change dramatically. You know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say whether Manoah's wife prayed for this or it just happened. But here's the critical piece. She went through this particular intersection in her life, and she didn't know it until it got there. But she was ready for the intersection. Look at what it says next. The angel gives her some instruction. He says, so be careful. You must not drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, nor eat any forbidden food. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of context, because if we got instructions like this, like, hey, we know you're pregnant, you're not supposed to maybe drink alcohol, but all this other stuff seems a little weird, right? You're going to give birth to a son, can't cut his hair, like he's going to be designated. We don't know this stuff. This doesn't make any sense to us, right? This is important to them, though, because this Nazirite vow means that God is going to use their son in some specially significant way. In fact, he says he will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines. You see, they didn't like the Philistines. They didn't like these people that were Gentiles, that were further away. Like they didn't like those people. And they had been allowed, it says in the beginning of this chapter, allowed to be under the rule of the Philistines. And so God was going to begin to rescue. So she began to hear this as a huge deal. She didn't plan for it to be that way. But her decision to listen was huge. Because you know what? Small decisions have a big impact, don't they? Sometimes we can make some pretty big decisions without realizing that we're making really big decisions. Like it's happened in your life, like it happened in hers. She could have just gotten the good news, hey, I'm going to have a son, and then forgotten to listen to everything else. But she made a small decision to listen to what this angel of the Lord had to say. She didn't know exactly, even it says a little bit later, she didn't know who this guy was or what he was from or what was happening. She just wanted to listen a little bit more. But you know how easy it would be to get wrapped up in the excitement? You're going to have a kid? Yes. Who cares, right? Who cares about the rest of the information? It would be easy to do that. You've faced big decisions in your life without knowing they're big, right? I mean, can I just be honest with you? Sometimes we have a tendency to pay attention to the really big decisions and we miss the little ones. Sometimes we get so enamored with the wedding that we forget the marriage, right? We worry about where we're going to get married. We worry about who's going to be there. We worry about what kind of food we're going to have, what kind of dress we're going to wear, but we don't worry about learning to communicate. It's usually the smaller decisions that will wind up capsizing a marriage. Can I be honest with you? I've never experienced a couple that was struggling because they got married in the wrong place. I've worked with a lot of couples who've struggled because they didn't take the critical time to learn to pivot and learn to communicate. Because small decisions make a really big decision, big difference in our lives. So let me just impress this upon us. Like the idea of principle number one of this is small decisions in your life will have a big impact and direction. Let's look at that verse again. It says this at the end: he will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines. That would be a crazy thing to have to justify, right? To balance, right? Her own excitement that she was no longer going to be childless. Her own excitement that she was going to be able to have a son, but that God was going to use the son. She could have gotten wrapped up in the circumstances of the moment. We get wrapped up in circumstances all the time. But what was really genuinely an important moment for her was the critical moment to say, God, I want to know what you want for me. Trusting God is always a pivotal move. When we get to that point in our life where we have a choice to trust God or to live in our own power, to live in our own story or choose to live in His, that's always a pivotal move in our lives. The woman, it says, went to her husband and told him. Now, this would be a weird statement to get if your wife comes in and she says, a man of God came to see me. He looked like an angel. Very awesome. I don't know about you, but most husbands are going to listen really closely. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name, but he said to me, you will conceive and give birth to a son. Now then, do drink no wine or other fermented drink, and do not eat anything unclean, because the boy will be of the Nazarite of God from birth until the day of his death. Like, this is a pretty crazy statement, right? Manoah's wife goes to Manoah and says, hey, some random, really good-looking guy showed up, and he told me some stuff. He told me about that I was going to conceive a child. Can you imagine the amazement in Manoah? And Manoah has this pivotal moment in his life where he has a chance to kind of change directions all of a sudden. And Manoah, it says, prayed to the Lord, saying, Lord, please let the man of God come back to us again and give us more instructions about this son who is going to be born. And God answered Manoah's prayer, and the angel of God appeared once again to his wife, and she was sitting in the field. But her husband, Manoah, was not with her. So she quickly ran and told her husband, the man who appeared to me the other day is here again. Look at what he says. Manoah ran back with his wife and asked, hey, are you the good-looking guy, right? Are you the guy who spoke to my wife the other day? Yes, he replied, I am. So Manoah asked him the same thing you and I ask. When your words come true, what kind of rules should govern the boy's life and work? Now, I know you're going, well, I wouldn't ask that. Yeah, you would. You know what we want? Every time we're at what we know is a critical moment in our life, what do we want? We want all the details. We want all the plans. What he's really asking is, hey, when this happens, I know it's going to happen, and I'm going to trust you. I already made the pivotal decision to trust you, and I want to just pivot a little more. What I don't want to do is I want to get past the pivot and into the plan, right? I want to get to the point where I know all the details. You ever been in that place? Where you're going, man, I want to trust God, but you know what I want, God? I want all the details. I want all the little things. Can you tell me all the rules that are going to govern his life? Just tell me what to do. Maybe you felt that way when you first got married, when you first started your job, when you first started having children. You're going, man, I just want to know all the details, right? But then raising kids or moving to a new place or getting married will teach you very quickly that you can't make plans for all those things. That God has a plan, and you may not get to know it. In fact, pivotal moments rarely come with a plan. If pivotal moments really are just us positioning our life in a way where we can trust and follow God, then probably sometimes, many times, we shouldn't expect a plan because there's no trust if we have all of the details. The angel comes back to Manoah and says, be sure your wife follows the instructions I gave her. He tells her, just kind of repeats them back and says, listen, your job, what you need to know right now isn't what is going to happen for your son. What you need to know right now is that what you need to do right now. Pivotal decisions don't come with a plan. This story goes on, and it's important that we understand this. I didn't tell you this earlier, but this baby that's going to be born is Samson. Samson is a big deal. It says this just a little bit later. The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him. The story goes on. Samson, if you aren't familiar with this, is one of the most significant judges in the book of Judges. He's one of the people that begins to lead Israel. Now, you might know him from Samson and Delilah, the haircut, the manipulation. You might know him from some of the other stories of even his failure to follow God and to do it. And we see one of those things. He says here in the beginning of the next chapter, Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now go get her for me as my wife. This was not something that would have been a good decision for him. This is not something that mom and dad dreamed for their child. When they were asking for the instructions of how to raise their baby, they wanted to avoid this kind of moment. Maybe you felt that way. Maybe you've got a kid that is making a decision that just seems to be going the wrong direction. And you're just so terrified and worried, right? I mean, that's exactly how Manoah and his wife felt. His father and his mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman? Isn't there a right choice that you could make among your relatives or among your own people? Must you go to this uncircumcised Philistine to get a wife? Like what he's saying isn't just about race, right? It's not just about an us and them feeling. These were the people that were oppressing him. These were the people that were out of bounds for people that would have been like him. They would not have been able to be able to experience purity and have a wife that was from another culture like this. So they're terrified that he's making a terrible decision. And he needs to make this decision. This is what's crazy about it. But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. Do you have a child maybe that acts like that? That goes, I don't really care what you want. I want what's right for me. I want what I want. His parents, it says this in the parentheses, did not know that this was from the Lord. That God was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. He was picking a fight with them, and he was going to utilize Samson's bad decision to make really good things. Sometimes that's the truth, isn't it? I mean, we need to look at what this is. Have you thought about what a parenthesis is? Parentheses are statements that the author knows is true, but that aren't necessary for us to really understand just the basics of the story. They're things that the author wants us to know that work outside the sentence. And that's how our lives are sometimes. There are things that the author knows that we don't yet know. And pivotal moments are often happen in the parentheses, don't they? There is something that the author knows now that we don't know yet. Can we just talk about that? That there are times in life where God knows what the future is and we don't. There are times where we've kind of got things ordered and figured out and we know what we think should happen. And there's a point in our lives, especially as we're raising our kids, where we have to trust that the author knows now what we don't know yet. Sometimes, many times, pivotal circumstances happen in those parentheses. Life seems to go on without them, but God wants us to trust, to pivot our faith story so that we can say, listen, I know that you're doing something significant, and a small step in action in my life will make a big change in direction. So let me just ask you this really kind of, like basic question for you. What is it where critical position are you in right now? What pivotal moment are you facing? Is it not something that's huge? Maybe usually, if not always, those pivotal moments are not giant descriptions. They're not the intersections with all the flashing lights and the warning signs. They're not the intersections with all the coordination of traffic. Sometimes the pivotal moments in your life, mostly the critical moments in your life, are those pivotal moments when you choose to change direction. Where is it that you know that you're headed in a direction that is not what you want for your life? Where do you need to pivot? Do you need to get up and start your day in a way that pivotally changes everything? Where it just changes directions, a small step in action that changes a big direction in your life. Maybe it's about your faith story. Maybe you're going, you know what, I haven't really been like all that, committed and involved in church. And I need to go, you know what, I'm going to make a small decision in my life, a small step to get more involved and more connected around here. And that small step will change your life in a big direction. Or maybe you've gone, you know what, I've been going to church all the time, but I don't really get involved. We're starting community groups right now, tonight, right here at Journey Church at 5:30. All you need to do is show up. We'll get you connected into a group. That small direction, will it change everything? No. But that small step will change directions in a big way. So let me just challenge you. You're facing critical moments, pivotal moments in your life right now. They don't always announce themselves as pivotal. So our hope is that you'll evaluate the intersections that happen in your life, and that you'll be able to, instead of running through blind, that you'll make some critical small choices that will change a big direction in your life.